baby. Let's rip into Republicans.
See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want. Because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
What's happening? I'm Dr. Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. Here's the bottom line. I play no games about policy, period. Too many people's lives are at stake. So here's what I do. I challenge conservative ideology that hinders the growth of this country. I make sure we place our facts in proper context, and I have no problem debating anyone on a position that I have. Progressives have the ideas to change the world, but when you really look at it, progressives have always change this world for the better. I want you to tune into my new show, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, right here on the TYT network, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'll see you there.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change. Young Turks, only the best show on the internet. Not a big deal though, not a big deal. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. We do have the news, and the usual stuff, disastrous, fun, standard fare. I'm gonna start out super random, just for like 15 seconds.
Cool, keep it tight. We got a lot.
Okay, we got to keep it tight. I just got a note on air from the EP. Okay, didn't even have to use my IFB. She just said it right there. Don't look up the wonderfully progressive movie by Adam McKay, original idea by David Sirota. #1 on Netflix worldwide, biggest week in Netflix history. Already top 3 most viewed in all of Netflix history, and establishment hacks in the Democratic Party. Why would they be opposed to it? Except they have a guilty conscience. Had called it a flop. Democratic consultants.
Listen,
Hilarious.
if I were among the elite in either government or the media, I would absolutely hate that film.
Yeah, because it's totally true and everybody loves it, and you look like idiots because you are. More important than idiots is corrupt. The powerful are incredibly greedy and corrupt. And that's what any news person should say. Go ahead, find that anywhere in mainstream media. Any reporter ever calling people in powerful greedy and corrupt. Isn't that weird that not a single reporter does that in the whole country, in the national media? Weird. All right, let's do actual news.
All right. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and yes, he is the Senate Majority Leader, believe it or not, has basically said that he will force a vote on reforming the legislative filibuster in the Senate. This is in an effort to pave the way for the passage of a voting rights bill. Now, the voting rights bill, of course, is incredibly important for the future of American democracy. Also, it's incredibly important for the future of these politicians' careers, considering the fact that Republican gerrymandering and other suppressive laws in red states really do undermine the possibility of Democrats being able to win elections fair and square. Now, here's what he had to say about this issue on the Senate floor this week.
If Republicans continue to hijack the rules of the chamber to prevent action on something as critical as protecting our democracy, then the Senate will debate and consider changes to the rules on or before January 17th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Now, those are some strong words. It seems like Chuck Schumer has a real plan in place. He's gonna do what's necessary in order to get voting rights passed. But when you scratch beneath the surface just a little bit, you notice that there really is no plan, which means this calls for another edition of The Dumb and the Feckless.
One of my prayers is that the Republicans will take back their party.
Things keep dripping out, drip, 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 and the truth comes out.
Now, Senator Schumer felt that maybe it'd be a good idea to go on MSNBC, a very friendly cable news network, to get into the details about what he's gonna do to ensure that the legislative filibuster, which requires 60 senators to vote in favor of legislation, is reformed so it doesn't serve as such an obstacle in getting the Democratic agenda passed. And I want you to pay close attention to how Joyanne Reid, of all people, pushes back, asks some pretty tough questions about Democrats in the Senate and how Schumer really fails in answering how he's gonna get this done.
Can you tell us any evidence that Manchin or Sinema has given publicly or to you that they care more about voting rights and the democracy continuing than about the filibuster? Because I haven't seen any evidence that they actually have more support for voting rights and democracy than they do for the filibuster.
What I can tell you this is they have made even public statements that, particularly Manchin, that he wants to get voting rights done and wants to figure out a way to do it.
But why should we believe that? Why should we believe that? They haven't taken any action.
Well, we got to keep pressing them and pressing them and pressing them until they do. There is too much at risk here. If obviously they were saying yes to us, we wouldn't have to worry about this. But we do have to worry, and we have to keep pushing.
There's no real plan in place. And how do I know that? Well, he specifically mentioned conservative Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, who has served as a massive obstacle, going on the record to say that he's open to doing something about the legislative filibuster, especially when it comes to voting rights. However, turns out that's not really the case. Senator Joe Manchin voiced skepticism over a Democratic push to change the filibuster along party lines, warning that his preference is for any rule changes to be, of course, bipartisan, meaning that there would be no rule changes. Republicans would not want to reform or do away with the filibuster. In fact, he says specifically, being open to a rules change that would create a nuclear option is very, very difficult. It's a heavy lift, Manchin told reporters when asked about using the nuclear option in which Democrats would change the 60-vote legislative filibuster on their own. Cenk.
Okay, so lots of fun things here. First of all, I saw an article the other day that referred to Joy Reid as one of the biggest progressives in DC. I don't know too many people on the planet that dislike progressives more than Joy Reid does. And even she's tired of the nonsense from Democratic leadership. Now, I believe her when she says she cares about voting rights. So she's pressing him on voting rights. Come on, this is a bridge too far even for progressive killer Joy Reid. She's like, aren't we gonna do anything? Really, Chuck Schumer, we're gonna do nothing at all? And so so look, that's a funny way of, backhanded way of complimenting her, but good questions, way to press them, I appreciate it. I don't care about anything in the past, I just care about whether people are doing a good job now. So I appreciate the line of question. Now, Chuck Schumer's answers, I mean, look, it's pathetic. It's pathetic. If you had any real press in the country, you would all know, and they'd all be telling you the most obvious thing in the world. I mean, look, guys, it's not even For the People Act. For the People Act was a good piece of legislation. It was called HR 1 last time around, and the Democrats pretended to be in favor when they knew they had no chance of passing because Trump was in office. Now, when they got into office, they're like, HR 1 has anti-corruption stuff, got it, and they ripped it apart. They have the John Lewis Act now, they named it that because it's weaker, so they want to say, John Lewis, you all like John Lewis, he's a civil rights hero. We'll put our weakest piece of legislation with the best name. So, but even that is not right now, is not going to pass. So look, any reporter that entertains any talk from Manchin or any other politician about how Republicans might vote to end the filibuster, or that for anything, or that Republicans might vote in favor of voting rights. No, you can't let that stand. Otherwise, you're not at all a reporter. There is no chance of that happening. Zero. That is an obvious brazen lie. Would just say right there and then, really, you have 10 Republicans who are going to agree with Democrats on voting rights? Name them. You couldn't name 2, let alone 10. You're obvious liars. So Chuck Schumer knows that. So now they're going to have to go to, let's do a carve out of the carve out, and maybe somebody could talk, and we won't actually get anything done, but we'll have more talking in DC. And pretty please, Joe Manchin.
Oh, Cenk, it's very sweet. The idea of even being able to accomplish a carve out for voting rights, because Joe Manchin has responded to that possibility as well. Let's go to graphic 4 here. Manchin appeared skeptical that it would just nix the filibuster entirely. Anytime there's a carve out, you eat the whole turkey. There's nothing left, Manchin said. In expressing, by the way, his admiration and love, devotion, loyalty to this legislative filibuster, which clearly serves to basically carry out corporate interests and block any type of progressive agenda or even moderate Democrat agenda from passing. And by the way, I mean, look, there's an issue, and people might get offended by this. We need new leadership. We need to elect young, energetic people into Congress who actually want to fight for us. People like Nancy Pelosi, people like Chuck Schumer, this type of Democratic leadership definitely, like, it seals the deal in regard to losing again and again and again. I mean, look at them right next to me, look at them. That's Democratic leadership. These are the people who are supposed to fight back against the fascistic Republican Party under Trump's leadership, please. And if you don't believe me, the interview with Joy Reid ended pretty poorly. And I have that video for you right now, let's take a look.
But when senators go to them and say, I will lose my election unless we do something about voting rights, when senators come to them and say, we will not have a democracy anymore, not just for 2 years, but for 10 years, and constant senators of all different stripes, including some of our most moderate senators. We have a group of 3 senators who's constantly talking to them, Angus King, John Tester, and the senator from Virginia as well, saying to them, we were not for changing the rules, but we've changed our mind. Too much is at stake.
The obsession with holding on to power and not letting it go is hurting the Democratic Party, it's hurting the country. These are not leaders, these are not people who are looking out to represent the best interests of the American people. These are just narcissistic individuals who are concerned with their own profits and their own power. And the fact that there's still no real plan in place to do something about voter suppression in this country tells you everything you need to know about the current Democratic leadership.
Yeah, and so first of all, guys, I know no reporter in DC will ever be honest with you, but they're nearly senile. But keep it real. He can't remember Tim Kaine's name. Tim Kaine ran for vice president in the Democratic Party 5 years ago. Tim Kaine, the guy who was VP. John Tester, they're totally incompetent. The reason I have to scream it, guys, is because I'm trying to speak over the rest of the entire media who are all pretending that Biden, Pelosi, and Schumer are master legislators, master negotiators. They're so good at their job when we can see their face melting on TV. And so I'm here to tell you the most obvious thing in the world, but I have to scream it because the rest of the media goes, oh, don't listen to them, that's ridiculous. No, of course, your leaders are supposed to be senile. They're not supposed to know what the hell's going on. And on voting rights, again, bare minimum. I thought $15 minimum wage was bare minimum. That apparently has no chance of passing. But I didn't even think, like I knew they were gonna get rid of the anti-corruption parts, but I didn't think that they wouldn't pass voting rights. It's political suicide not to pass voting rights, let alone the fact that this is what we've been fighting for like literally centuries in this country. And Schumer said at the very end that it was, quote, too important to give up on. Oh my God, they're considering giving up on it. Oh my God, they're considering giving up on the absolute bare minimum to save democracy. And so in the past, the filibuster was used to block voting rights. And it's still being used to block voting rights. But there is a difference, guys. In the past, the filibuster was used to protect racists about civil rights, voting rights, and anti-lynching laws, okay? Now, that is not the point. I don't want you to get confused because mainstream media use identity politics all the time. No, now the filibuster is used to protect corporate donors because they don't want the $15 minimum wage passed. They don't want any of those things passed that affect their interests. If you get rid of the filibuster, Democrats have no longer have any excuse to say, oh, there was nothing we could do. Oh God, can we give everything to the donors?
That's right.
Oh golly gee, there was nothing we could do. Filibuster, wink. How many times have you seen MSNBC anchors say that? How many times have you seen CNN anchors say it? How many times has the New York Times written it? Almost never. Either they don't know and they're fools, they should just be plumbers, they don't know anything about politics, or they're lying to you on purpose. They're keeping the actual reason away from you. And now it turns out they're willing to betray black voters, Democratic voters, and the whole country and democracy itself to protect corporations. That's who these sickening corporate Democrats are. Now but hey, we haven't given up yet. Oh, wow, Chuck, you're a real role model in leadership.
All right, well, let's move on to our next story where there's also a lack of leadership, especially when it comes to consequences for things like sexual misconduct and death. So, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo will not face prosecution for either his sexual misconduct allegations or the fact that his policies led to the preventable deaths of elderly people in nursing homes and then proceeded to cover up the data related to that. Now, let's start off with the decision among prosecutors in regard to his nursing home policies during the pandemic. Here's what we know based on Politico's reporting. The state attorney general's office released a report in 2021 accusing the state of drastically undercounting COVID-19 deaths in nursing home facilities. Cuomo's aides overruled state health officials on the issue, deciding not to publish a scientific paper that would have showed the scope of the deaths and to not send 2 letters the state health officials had drafted for state lawmakers. Just to give you more context on what he did, he essentially forced nursing homes to take in elderly COVID patients as they were being released from the hospital. And of course, that led to the spread of COVID within these nursing homes, and that led to a spike in nursing home deaths. After that data was available, his administration avoided having to publish the accurate number of deaths in these nursing homes. So that was a huge issue, and apparently he's not gonna face any criminal charges for that. Prosecutors in Manhattan believe that he didn't break any laws. So Alan Abram, his lawyer basically, outside counsel to Cuomo's office, said in a statement that the former governor was told Monday by the head of the Manhattan District Attorney's Elder Abuse Unit that the office had completed a thorough investigation and would not bring charges.
Oh, well, at least it was thorough. We thoroughly decided that we weren't gonna hold him accountable under any circumstance. Now, I was gonna do this story, we ran out of time last week, about how prosecutors in different areas of New York, one by one, started dropping charges against Cuomo, meaning, man, you know what, we'll just let it go, we'll let it go, right? But I thought, hey, look, there's at least one left in Albany, and it looks like they're gonna pursue criminal charges, and I had that written up as what I was gonna tell you guys. They're not gonna do that either, okay? So in that case, it was an assistant that he grabbed the butt of several times, and then that's the one where he reached under her shirt and grabbed her breasts.
Yeah, let me give you more details on that.
Yeah, she's gonna give you the details. They dropped all the cases.
Everything.
You know why? Because he's one of the elites. They're not gonna put him in jail. There's no way they were ever gonna do that. So they can tell me all these pretty little lies about like, oh no, it's not coordinated. We just all happened to decide that there was just not enough evidence on poor Andrew Cuomo. I mean, all the people that are dead in the nursing homes is out of control corruption and the groping of women. We just acknowledged you just couldn't find any evidence, you know? I mean, didn't he pay enough of a price? His reputation has been slightly besmirched. And and he's among the elites. We have besmirched an elite. That's gotta be good enough. No, it's definitely not good enough.
So I have 2 things to say. Number one, and maybe this doesn't speak highly of me, but I've gotten to a point where I'm desensitized. Like I have come to expect that people in positions of power, regardless of how hideous their crimes are, don't face criminal consequences for what they do, okay? I mean, think about the number of credible allegations against men in positions of power, people like Brett Kavanaugh, people like Donald Trump. I mean, that kind of sexual misconduct, whether it's carried out by a Democrat or a Republican, it doesn't matter as long as we're talking about a person who has money and power. So I'm not saying that the way I feel is right, but it's become so commonplace and so expected that I'm almost desensitized to these types of outcomes. The other thing I want to note is, how many places can you guys go to where the media is fair in having this kind of critique regardless of the political identity of the individual we're talking about? Because honestly, when it comes to issues of sexual misconduct, it becomes so politicized by one side or the other, when in reality, it's wrong regardless of who carries it out. And there should be consequences, including criminal consequences, toward the person who carried it out. In this case, with the sexual misconduct, let me give you the details. The Albany Sheriff's Department, or office I should say, had filed a criminal complaint in October charging Cuomo with forcible touching, which is a misdemeanor sex crime that carries a penalty of up to 1 year in jail. Okay, so Cuomo will not be prosecuted in the criminal case involving allegations that he groped a former aide in the executive mansion in 2020, the Albany County District Attorney announced. Now, the move to drop the case, by the way, marked a reprieve for Cuomo, who was actually expected to be arraigned in court on Friday, even as the prosecutor described the former aide, Brittany Camiso as credible and said he was, quote, deeply troubled by allegations like the ones at issue here.
No, he wasn't. He's lying.
He is lying. Then why didn't you pursue the case? And so the argument is, well, let me give you his exact argument, okay? So here is the Albany County District Attorney. He says, while many have an opinion regarding the allegations against the former governor, the Albany County DA's office is the only one who has a burden to prove the elements of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. While we found the complainant in this case cooperative and credible, after review of all the available evidence, we have concluded that we cannot meet our burden at trial. So I was curious about that because what are the burdens? And if you look at similar cases, how are they carried out? Are they prosecuted? Are they let go? Are the charges dropped? Now, this is the third prosecutor, by the way, who has decided to drop charges, sexual misconduct charges against Cuomo, as Cenk had mentioned. Let's look at the burden of proof. Let's go to graphic 7 here. Prosecutors in Albany would have had to clear a relatively high bar had they proceeded with the criminal charge, okay? So, hold on one second. Okay, so they would have, high burden of proof, which required them to prove not only that Cuomo had touched Camiso, but that he did so with the intention of satisfying his own sexual desire or to degrade her. Because cases like these rarely have irrefutable physical evidence, much of the burden would likely have fallen on Camiso's testimony. Okay, sounds like the burden of proof is pretty serious, right? But what are the statistics when it comes to these types of cases? Is it worth pursuing prosecution here? I'll give you the numbers, you decide for yourselves. Of the roughly 1,400 cases like Mr. Cuomo's brought in a typical year across the state, almost four in 10 are dismissed or dropped, state criminal statistics show. So why not pursue it? I mean, that's actually not bad. I mean, yeah, there's a possibility that it'll be dismissed or dropped, or there isn't enough evidence.
Yeah. So first of all, that New York Times story is crap. It's status quo protection racket. So look at the way they framed the story. Oh, well, it's a high burden of proof. Almost 4 out of 10 are dropped. Wait a minute. That means the majority, and in fact, a significant majority, over 60% are not dropped. So why did he get the exception and not the rule? Now, did the New York Times frame it that way?
Nope.
Oh, that's really weird. Why are they dropping this case when the great majority of them go forward? No, they framed it as, oh, it's a high bar. Most of them are dropped anyway, 4 out of 10, almost 4 out of 10.
Almost 4 out of 10.
Wait, isn't that curious how they framed it? Because the New York Times loves the powerful and caters to the powerful. That's their job, is to kiss the ass of the powerful. So they should have ripped Cuomo and the prosecutors, who obviously brazenly, corruptly dropped these charges. Nothing. I mean, look at the other framing. Oh, well, they'd have to just rely on her word. That's also true in rape cases. Should we drop all rape cases? Come on, it's absurd. They're looking for every excuse to say, oh, come on, oh, he already stepped down as governor. Oh, come on, you guys, come on. But he's so powerful and elite. I mean, we can't put him in there with regular people, yuck. I'm telling you, man, all of them, including the reporters at the New York Times, they genuinely feel that way. They think justice, in other words, revenge, vengeance, etc., is for us. We should get that. Never the elites, they're untouchable. So let's realize what actually happened here, okay? The other cases dropped first because every one of them said, oh, don't worry, he's still being prosecuted in Albany. No heat on me. Being prosecuted in Albany, criminal charges, sexual assault, that's really serious. So the press wrote, don't worry about it, they're gonna get him later. Now, when they drop the main charge, they're like, it's no big deal. I mean, these things get dropped sometimes, it's no big deal. I mean, look at the prosecutor. I'm gonna reread, but in reality, what Anna read you. He said, while we found the complainant in this case cooperative and credible, now let me add the reality, which is, but we chose not to do anything about this credible complainant anyway.
Exactly.
Because she didn't have political power, and the person who was accused had tons and tons of political power. So we chose to do nothing because we're corrupt. So the only real question that the New York Times and every reporter should have asked, but didn't ask and did the opposite, is Was there a formal or informal deal here? Because in the beginning, as skeptical as I am, I would have guessed that there was no deal because you'd have to make a deal with each district attorney in the different counties, and that seemed like a bridge too far. But the way that, I mean, the highly coordinated gymnastics they did here to let Cuomo off the hook made me change my mind and go, I guess I'm still naive after all this time.
Definitely.
Yeah, now I think the deal was not just informal groupthink, it was formal. They reached out and said, he's gonna step down, everybody dropped the charges when no one's paying attention, and don't worry, the press will cover our ass. They love us, just tell them what to do and then type it like the good dogs that they are.
When we come back from the break, unfortunately, the Joe Rogan situation has devolved further. He is upset over the censorship of his show. We'll give you the details on that and also get into the details of the man who has claimed that he pioneered the mRNA vaccine and why he is against COVID vaccines today. We've got those stories and more when we come back.
All right, back on TYT. New YouTube members, Lunar Minx, Michael Cohen, Melissa Verduin. You guys are amazing. So Melissa, Michael, and Lunar Minx, you guys make this show possible. You allow us to speak truth to power, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you guys. And if you're not on YouTube and you can't hit that join button below the video, then you go to tyt.com/join. It'll take you about 30 seconds, and it makes a giant difference. All right, now speaking of people making a big difference, look at all these wonderful people on Super Chat. Chaplain Fred wrote in, hello Cenk and Anna, as always love you guys and all you do, but I have to say I didn't look up and I cried and laughed and was amazed at how accurate this movie was. So he watched it and saw how accurate it was. I love the ending, both Tyler Perry and Kate reminded me of Fox News and wrote in marijuana 2024. Okay. Guys, if you haven't watched the movie, go watch it. I asked Nina Turner if she watched it off air. She said only 4 times. Okay, so yeah, and that's why the establishment caught feelings because they are accurately portrayed to be the clowns that they are. And by the way, that's why it is incredibly well received, not by real people, not just progressives, not just Democrats. The right wing likes it. Why? Because it rightly mocks the people in power. Hence the people in power, it's driving them crazy to see that it's #1 and on its way to being the #1 movie in history on Netflix. So it's already at #3. I love it. Peter Hamby with his usual haiku, he filibustered to a Schumer the power, eyes are short-sighted. Belly Diva 23 with a wonderful message, and thank you for being so generous already. Writing in, if I was a billionaire, I'd give you all my money and then work for you because I know you would pay me a livable wage and provide decent health care. Thank you, Cenk, Anna, and everyone at TYT for telling the truth and always keeping it 100. Look, man, you don't have to give $1 billion. Look, we could get fundamental change in America for a lot less than that. I can guarantee it. We just need, honestly, if one person did it, let alone a collection of you guys, I swear we can get that change. I know exactly how to do it. You wouldn't give it to TYT, you give it to political causes, and we could make that happen. But so far, it hasn't happened yet. You know, you could eliminate world poverty for like, I think it's like 2 or 3% of Elon Musk's money. How gross and disgusting are those billionaires that just sit on literally hundreds of billions of dollars? They know that millions of people are dying from poverty. And they don't lift a finger. They disgust me. They're terrible human beings. Jaheim Kaiser said, good old JoJo going back to the Jerk of the Year Awards in 2022, this time solo. And Elvin Gully writing, corporate Dems don't want to win. It's easier for them to be the minority. They don't have to answer for their failures when they have power. Elvin, you're 100% right. The Democrats love losing, so they don't have no responsibility. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. News.
All right, let's do it. Joe Rogan has decided to join GITR, the right-wing alternative to Twitter, as an insurance policy in case he gets banned from Twitter. Now, this came after Congresswoman Marjorie Greene was suspended from Twitter for violating its policies on vaccine disinformation, something she has done multiple times, but she has done it so many times that it appears that she's now dealing with a permanent suspension. We'll see how that goes. Now, GITR, as you know, was launched by Jason Miller, who was a former senior Trump advisor. And in his announcement, Rogan wrote this is his post on GITR. Just in case Twitter gets even dumber, I'm here now as well, rejoice. Now, Rogan does have cause for concern in terms of possibly getting censored. In fact, he has been censored by some platforms already in regard to the vaccine and coronavirus related misinformation he doles out with his podcast. For instance, he has consistently promoted the use of ivermectin as a treatment for coronavirus, even though there is no evidence of ivermectin as a treatment for coronavirus. And he has, of course, downplayed the need for young people to get vaccinated because he believes that it should only be used for people who have comorbidities or are more vulnerable to coronavirus. Now, Twitter, by the way, also banned Dr. Robert Malone, an mRNA vaccine scientist who has been accused of spreading misinformation about COVID-19 just days before he appeared on Rogan's podcast last week. Malone, of course, has also opened a GITR account. Now, YouTube has decided to take down Rogan's conversation with Dr. Malone. And Dr. Malone's actually an interesting character. We'll get into more detail about him in just a minute. But before we do, I want you to get accustomed to, or I should say, acquainted with him in case you haven't heard of him. So Dr. Malone, during his conversation with Joe Rogan, had used the phrase mass formation psychosis multiple times to basically compare modern day America to Nazi Germany. And even though he is one of the pioneers of the mRNA framework that's used in the COVID vaccines, he's now out there spreading all sorts of scary, paranoid misinformation about it to discourage people from getting vaccinated. With that said, I want to play just a short snippet of his conversation with Joe Rogan, and then we'll discuss. Let's watch.
What the heck happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s? You know, very intelligent, highly educated population, and they went barking mad. And how did that happen? The answer is mass formation psychosis. When you have a society that has become decoupled from each other and has free-floating anxiety and a sense that things don't make sense, we can't understand it. And then their attention gets focused by a leader or a series of events on one small point, just like hypnosis. They literally become hypnotized and can be led anywhere. It doesn't matter whether they lie to them or whatever. The data are irrelevant. And furthermore, anybody who questions that narrative is to be immediately attacked. They are the other. This is central to mass formation psychosis. And this is what has happened. We had all those conditions. If you remember back before 2019, everybody was complaining, the world doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. And we're all isolated from each other. We're all on our little tools. We're not connected socially anymore, except through social media. And then this thing happened and everybody focused on it.
So we've seen this happen before where people like to compare what individuals are doing to keep themselves safe during a global pandemic to Nazi Germany. I would argue that that is an insane comparison and incredibly insulting, especially to people who have family members who suffered during the Holocaust. But it's just the whole situation is super strange because someone who considers himself the pioneer of the technology necessary to create these vaccines is now so heavily against it. And look, I can say as a free American, I am not a victim of any type of groupthink. I want to live my life as a free individual without having to worry about getting hospitalized or without having to worry about dying from COVID. Same with my family members. The way that you can finally go out there and live life and not be so atomized and isolated from everyone else is to get vaccinated. And look, if people don't want to get vaccinated, I would be totally fine with that if they weren't overwhelming our hospitals and essentially leading to a situation where people with other ailments are getting denied treatment because they don't have hospital beds necessary to treat them. I mean, he's not a dumb person. He is a scientist. He is a doctor. He knows these things. But apparently he's got a huge bias that wasn't discussed in the context of this Joe Rogan interview, which I'll get to in just a second. But Jake, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I have a nuanced take on this. And actually, I think I disagree with you on one thing. I actually think his explanation of mass formation psychosis made a lot of sense, whether the Nazis used it or anybody else used it. But as he was describing it, I thought it described the right wing perfectly. That's exactly what happens. You get one leader who says, ignore all the evidence, and if anyone disagrees with the leader, then they are to be shunned. And so now there's some, again, nuance within the right wing too. That leader, unchallenged leader, used to be Donald Trump. It's now morphing into Joe Rogan / Alex Jones / Tucker Carlson, right? But do they have mass formation psychosis? Definitely. They will not listen to any facts about anything, which is deeply ironic. So, and are they slipping into fascism? I think they definitely are. So now both sides think that each other are Nazis. By the way, now I think for reasons that we've explained, and I can explain more here, I think that they are not in favor of democracy. Obviously the big one being, hey, they lost an election and they had no evidence and they lost 60 court cases and they said, screw it, we don't want democracy, right? But in their minds, they are the protectors of democracy. But guys, whether you're on the right wing or the left wing, you keep getting distracted. The people in charge is not the right wing or the left wing, it's corporations.
Yes.
And so,
and by the way, Malone would have you believe that he agrees with you on that. That there is an issue with these pharmaceutical companies. It's all about profit. That they rushed the creation of these vaccines, and now everyone is part of this giant experiment. But it's interesting because while he spews that talking point, which by the way, there's a lot of truth to that, he leaves out pretty relevant information regarding the fact that he worked as a consultant for major pharmaceutical companies. Like that was a huge part of the money he made, right? And so I think what we're experiencing right now is unfortunately this cocktail of failures among our institutions. You're right, it's not about our political leaders brainwashing us, it's about corporate rule, which also gets left out of these lack of nuanced conversations. And yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. By the way, we don't disagree. I take offense to the idea that he's applying this mass, brainwashing ideology to people who are doing what's necessary to keep themselves and people in their community safe, right?
Yeah. So look, Malone's a liar, or he's an idiot. I don't know. He's lost his mind. Whatever the adjective you want to attach to. Why? I'm not just saying that, and I'm not mainstream media where they just say, "Oh, anyone who disagrees with us should be banned." And by the way, this is really important, guys. Mainstream media also does mass formation psychosis. They will tell you things like, no, people don't want higher wages because they're concerned about inflation. Well, that's not true. No poll shows that. No, you don't want higher wages because you're part of corporate rule. So and on this show, we've shown you literally hundreds of brazen, over-the-top lies of mainstream media. Why? All in favor of corporate rule. So now, but why do I say those things about Dr. Malone? Now, I'm not saying he was never a doctor and he was never of sound mind. He apparently was a good doctor at some point, right? By the way, there's a lot of folks who were good doctors at some point and then have lost their minds. Named Dr. Oz, now that he's like a clown, everybody's forgotten. But he was literally one of the best heart surgeons in the country. Remember, Ben Carson used to be an amazing surgeon. So you can be a doctor and then lose your mind. And so in his case, why am I sure? Guys, all of the other doctors working at all of the other hospitals aren't all part of the drug company scam. A random doctor in the middle of Kansas or Rhode Island or Hawaii or wherever they aren't all like, oh, the big drug companies, they have sent me a check for $10.73. I will now lie to all my patients and endanger their lives. You really think all of the world's doctors, except Dr. Malone and 2 other randos that Joe Rogan found, are all lying? That their patients that are dying are not the unvaccinated, they're the vaccinated, but every single doctor in every single hospital is lying. You'd have to be nuts to believe that. And at this point, Joe Rogan is definitely nuts, and so is this stupid ass quack Dr. Malone. Now, so I don't mind him getting banned for saying absurd things and that are obvious outrageous lies, but there's still nuance, because if he says, hey, listen, I don't think the kids should take the vaccine, I don't think that's an outrageous opinion. I don't necessarily, not necessarily, I don't agree with that. My kids took it, but that shouldn't get you banned. So everybody has to follow the science instead of the politics of each stupid camp.
Yeah, and look, I think that, I don't have the same views on the censorship of Dr. Malone that I have with someone like, let's say, Alex Jones, because he is a doctor at the end of the day, and there is a bias here that I think is taking, really influencing his commentary on the COVID vaccines that I think gets left out of these conversations. But once you start censoring the opinions of actual scientists and doctors, you do run into some problems. I think that I do worry about that. I'm just putting that out there. It's very different. It's very different from someone who incites violence toward victims of the Sandy Hook shooting, which is what Alex Jones did.
Yeah, and I think Rogan is now on the edge, right? I never thought he was on the edge before, but the reason why he's on the edge is he keeps bringing in 2 doctors and not telling his audience there are literally millions of other doctors who disagree. This guy's in the 0.00001% minority. Well, then ironically, Rogan is doing an old mainstream media trick, which is, hey, some people say this and some people say that. Well, I'll call it even. Well, it ain't even. You're de facto lying to your audience. And by the way, if you just stuck to the parts that are true, of course you're allowed to disagree. And guys, look, we have a tremendous self-interest in not wanting censorship. The mainstream media hates us. The establishment Democrats hate us even more than the establishment Republicans. We would be among the first banned for just opinions. But at the same time, when you look at things like this, if their doctors have disagreements about cancer, well, okay, that's one thing, but cancer's not contagious. So they could have that academic disagreement all day in public, even if one of them is a quack, right? But when you have a contagious disease, and there are doctors out there who are saying, oh yeah, no big deal, man. Oh yeah, I'll take the vaccine. Yeah, spread it around your family, it's so great. Well, then the platforms have some responsibility to go, I need you to stop endangering people's lives.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to get into what I keep hinting at, which is there's some bias here in regard to Dr. Malone and these COVID vaccines, because I wanted to understand, how is it that someone who considers himself the pioneer of mRNA, like the mRNA framework, then feels the need to come out and discourage people from taking a vaccine that uses that research and saves people's lives? Well, The Atlantic wrote a lengthy piece about this. Tom Bartlett, I want to give him credit for the article. And apparently Malone, I'm reading directly from the piece. Malone says he deserves credit for more than just, hold on one second. Okay, here we go. Malone was the first author on a 1989 paper demonstrating how RNA could be delivered into cells using lipids, which are basically tiny globules of fat, and a co-author on a 1990 Science paper showing that if you inject pure RNA or DNA into mouse muscle cells, it can lead to the transcription of new proteins if the same approach worked for human cells. The latter paper said in its conclusion, this technology may provide alternative approaches to vaccine development. And to be sure, that is true. right? So he is one of the pioneers, to give him credit. He's not some quack. But then things got a little shady, okay? And it turns out that he feels that he was essentially erased from the history books in regard to being the pioneer. And it seems like he didn't want to give credit to his co-authors in regard to the research that was done in the 1980s. So the piece goes on to note that Malone says he deserves credit for more than just sparking hope in regard to this vaccine technology. He dropped out of graduate school in 1988, just short of his PhD, and went to work at a pharmaceutical company called Vickel. He now claims that both the Salk Institute and Vickel profited from his work and essentially prevented him from further pursuing his research. A Salk Institute spokesperson said that nothing in the Institute's records substantiates Malone's allegations. The biotech company into which Vickel was merged, known as Brickell, did not respond for requests for comment. To say that Malone remains bitter over this perceived mistreatment doesn't do justice to his sense of aggrievement. He calls what happened to him intellectual rape. Relevant details about his background that I would maybe bring up.
Yeah, but look, that's why we say beware of fake populists. So Joe Rogan says, oh, watch out for the big drug companies. That's why you should take ivermectin produced by big drug companies. And this Malone guy is like, beware big drug companies. I mean, I loved working at a big drug company and I thought they should have given me more credit and more money, but they didn't. So now I'm bitter. And 30 years later, I'm doing strike back. It might endanger your life, but what do I care about you, man? Hey, look, I got old grievances here. Guys, there are real massive issues with drug companies, including how they are jacking up drug prices.
Yep.
Our government isn't doing a goddamn thing about it. Corporate Democrats are the worst. The only people that tie them are corporate Republicans. They love higher drug prices. And I mean, you want to talk about assaulting us, that's what the drug companies are doing. OxyContin. Does it look like we're in favor of like, oh yeah, gee, just trust the drug companies no matter what? They screwed us on OxyContin in 1,000 ways, and the government oftentimes helped them do it, right? But that's why you have to use independent judgment. Now, do the drug companies lie about everything? Is every drug totally fake? Well, if that was true, I guess ivermectin would be fake, and the antibodies would be fakes, and all of those things that Rogan pushes would be fake. So obviously, it requires nuance. Sometimes the drug companies do terrible things. Sometimes they come up with good drugs that are true. Well, how do we know? Should you trust us because we're progressives? Should you trust Rogan because he has a big podcast? How do you know? Talk to the doctors you know. Go and see, oh, hey, there's 2 doctors online that say no. Hey, look, there's 20 million doctors who say yes. Are all 20 million doctors getting paid? Please use your mind, they're not all lying. You know who's lying? Joe Rogan, As he sits there going, oh, yeah, don't trust 20 million doctors. All the doctors in the world, I don't believe it, man. Yo, bro, if you were tough, bro, if you were tough and independent, man, and you were making money for me, telling people how, oh yeah, mainstream media sucks, man. You gotta be independent, you gotta be tough. And tough guys don't take vaccines, man. You kick ass. And they just said, hey, what did Ron Johnson today? Well, why can't, God gave us our bodies. Why do we need science and drugs? We don't need them at all. Oh yeah, I know, if you're an MMA fighter or you've got Jesus in your camp, you don't need it. Why don't you just let cancer deal with that? Hey, why are any of you going to the hospital? If you don't believe 99.99999% of all the doctors, why are you going to the hospital? Sit in your goddamn basements and do whatever the hell you want in your basement. You'll be super free there.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, Trump signals yet again that he is a lover of authoritarians and dictators. We've got that story and more when we come back.
All right, back on TYT. Let's go to members first. First of all, Steven Stretch just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. Thank you, Steven, we appreciate it. John Bugino says, sounds like Schumer's scared of losing re-election later this year. Not really, he's kind of half-assing it now because AOC hasn't made any moves to run against him. So a Democrat's gonna win in New York for sure, and no one outside of AOC can beat him. So whatever little, by the way, Ryan Grimm was on today on the conversation. I hope you had a chance to check it out. It's a half an hour before the Young Turks. And he still believes that Chuck Schumer wants to get some things accomplished. It's a thing that it's a very rare thing I disagree with Ryan Grimm on. I think Chuck Schumer, I would trust him as far as I can throw him. He's just a stupid corporate Democrat. He's playing whatever games until he runs out the clock on AOC. And once AOC doesn't enter that Senate race, kiss Chuck Schumer goodbye. Even the tiny little fig leaf that he's got now, he'll throw away and go back to being a complete and utter corporate tool. He is now, he's just trying to dress it up. Theater Goddess says, and by the way, hey, if Chuck Schumer or any of his stupid staffers say, oh, this guy's outrageous, can you believe it? Pass something. Prove me wrong, pass something. You're not gonna pass a goddamn thing. Okay, Theater Goddess says, Schumer's comments show yet again that those who are supposedly in charge have ceded power to Manchin instead of those that were properly voted into power. The Democratic Party is run by a politician who was elected by very few people. Guys, whether we say it or not, it's still true. When Democrats in the very next election tell you they're gonna do something, none of you are gonna believe it. Well, that's what you said you were gonna do. By the way, 20 elections in a row, and then when you get into power, all you have is excuses. So Democrats should run on, elect us, and we have more excuses that you can shake a stick at. My God, we'll come up with a parliamentarian. You know, when that story we did earlier, we didn't get a chance to get to it. They're delaying all of the bills because the parliamentarian is sick. Vote for Democrats. They will wait for the parliamentarian until time runs out. Shut up. Shut up, no one can stand you anymore. Gabriel Carmen del Pilar Carlson Merida, i.e. Gabby Merida, wrote in, Joe Manchin, a centrist who respects all political viewpoints, and it's just pure coincidence that he only shows support for the fascistic priorities of the political party he's nominally not a member of. It is funny how all of a sudden he can only find sympathy for Republican positions. Fascist, now Shy Coltrane 42 says, fascists now have a whataboutism card when it comes to libs attacking Orange Clown for grabbing women by the genitals. Governor Cuomo groping employees and not being held accountable. That is absolutely true. Mainstream media will lie to you about, oh, well, but. No, there's no but. He did the same thing, and Democrats cheered as he got away with it. Obi Mom gifted 5 subs. Frank Morningtree gifted 2 subs. Drink That OJ also gifted 2 subs. Paige Lars wrote in, so Chris Cuomo lost his job for nothing, then according to this article. What, it was nothing, why did they fire Chris Cuomo?
That's such a great point, and that's what I was thinking about as I was producing that story. Great point.
I love our audience, we'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys. More news.
Donald Trump has come out in support of Hungarian President Viktor Orban, who has severely eroded the country's generation-old democracy, which honestly isn't that surprising when you consider the fact that Trump has in the past supported Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines. He absolutely loves Narendra Modi in India, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, Kim Jong-un in North Korea. The list goes on and on and on. When someone tells you who they are and who their friends are, you should believe them. Now, Bernie Sanders called Trump out on this, tweeting, Trump wants to do here what Orban has done in Hungary: weaken democratic institutions, curb press freedom, and rewrite election laws to entrench his own party's power. The threat to our democracy could not be clearer, and we must act boldly to protect it. And Trump does seem in favor of much of what Orban has done in his own country. And let me go ahead and read through that so you can kind of compare. There's some parallels between his leadership and what we've seen with Orban in Hungary. According to Amnesty International, for instance, under Orban, The government continued to undermine judicial independence and public confidence in the judiciary, while women and transgender people were discriminated against in law and in practice, and asylum seekers were refused safe entry at borders and were expelled. And according to the New York Times, Orban and his party have steadily consolidated power in Hungary by weakening the country's independent and democratic institutions, rewriting election laws to favor his party, changing school textbooks. I mean, the list is so similar to what's happening here in the United States, curbing press freedoms, overhauling the Constitution, and changing the composition of the judiciary. Now, overhauling the Constitution isn't something that Republicans have tried to do yet, but many things on that list are similar to what we're experiencing here in the United States.
Yeah, they're just brazenly admitting it. Orban proudly declares that he's in favor of illiberal democracy.
It's amazing.
Do you know what that means? Like, normally, this is not about liberal or conservative. Liberal democracy just means a democracy that is the American version that we all love, including the right wing claims they love it, right? That means, yes, you have voting, and on top of that, you have protection of minorities. And so, by the way, I mean, they don't mean minorities as in Black, Latino, that they happen to be minorities here. Obviously, Hungary has different minorities. And by the way, some states in our country, some blue states now, white people are the minority, but they are also protected by a liberal democracy, right? And Orban just says, I don't want that. I want an illiberal so-called democracy. And he's stripped away all the protections that you normally get in a democracy by attacking the judiciary, the press, etc. And almost every commentator says that he is slowly strangling democracy in Hungary. But for Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump, that's not the bug, that's the feature. So they look at that and go, oh, that's a blueprint right there. All the reporters are saying he's strangling democracy, but he's doing it in a subtle, slow and steady way so that the country can't fight back effectively. Bingo, that's our guy. That's our guy. It's amazing that they're admitting it publicly. But there's no checks left anymore, and they could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. So Tucker Carlson thinks we got, over 750,000 dead in America. We told them not to get vaccinated and they believed us. We all got vaccinated. Tucker did, Trump did, they all got vaccinated. And we told our sucker idiot voters and viewers to not get vaccinated. They'll do anything we say. So you know what? The rest of the press, by the way, has lost credibility. They're not gonna believe a word they say. So we're gonna go talk to a fascist openly and talk about how great it's gonna be to strangle democracy, and no one's gonna care. And that's exactly what happened. So now Trump is going, yes, that guy who's the fascist in Eastern Europe, can't get enough of him.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm obviously not surprised that Trump would endorse Orban. I mean, I gave you that long list of other terrible leaders across the globe that he's been supportive of, including other autocrats and dictators. But nonetheless, I did want to get into some details in regard to other right wingers and how they're so supportive of Orban as well, including Tucker Carlson. But before I do it, I also wanted to just note, isn't it fascinating how, my mind always goes back to the arguments that were made against Colin Kaepernick when he was leading that protest while kneeling during the national anthem. And the main argument was, oh my God, it is so disgraceful. It is so insulting to our troops who fought for our freedoms, because their freedoms are so important, right? But at the same time, they seem to be very much in line with what Donald Trump likes, what Tucker Carlson likes, which is the erosion of our democracy, which is the support and admiration for autocrats and dictators. And so now I go to Tucker Carlson, who last fall, Carlson, the top-rated Fox News host, decided to broadcast from Budapest for a week, calling the nation a place with a lot of lessons for the rest of us.
Wow.
Former Vice President Mike Pence visited Hungary last year for a conference on conservative values, and the American Conservative Union has been promoting plans for a gathering there dubbed CPAC Hungary later this year.
Guys, you have to understand something. There's right-wing politicians all across the globe and all across Europe. They could have gone to any of them. They didn't pick him because he's right-wing. They picked him because he's killing democracy effectively. Wow. So historians will look back and go, how could they not see fascism coming? The leaders of the right wing in America went to celebrate a guy who's openly against democracy and is against immigrants, by the way, anti-Semitic, the whole spiel, right? And talks about how the Jewish financiers are the puppet masters. I mean, it's the exact same textbook, right?
Yeah.
And they're brazenly doing it in open, and we get it, you guys get it. Mainstream media and the Democratic establishment whistling past the ground.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, I can't get mad at the GOP, people like Trump, people like Tucker Carlson telling us who they are. We know who they are. They've been pretty transparent and open about it.
You almost have to give them credit for being how open and transparent they were.
The thing that enrages me is that the political party, the opposition to people like Trump and Tucker Carlson, the individuals who present themselves as the warriors for the little guy, the individuals who want to protect our democracy are weak, feckless, corrupt, and they're just liars. Okay, they can't even pass watered down legislation meant to protect our democratic process, even as they hold the levers of power, both in Congress and the executive branch. I mean, let that sink in.
Yeah, guys, Joe Manchin is saying he's asking for permission from 10 Republicans to do voting rights so they don't have to get rid of the filibuster. You're asking permission from fascists who are actively trying to kill our own democracy by limiting voting rights, who are saying, yeah, we're going over to that fascist to learn lessons on how to kill democracy, and you're asking them for permission to actually protect our democracy? They just told you they're not in favor of it. So many of them voted to decertify a perfectly valid election in 2020, and you're asking their permission? Nah, look, if the fascists take over, which now is on the board, it's actually possible in America. It's not hyperbole. It is possible. And historians look back, they will say that corporate Democrats were nearly as responsible as the Republicans because they let them do it and they didn't fight back at all.
Their stock portfolios are looking real good though.
Yeah,
Get those gains, boys and ladies.
Oh, you know, there was a story last week about Nancy Pelosi and her husband made millions of dollars in the stock market, and then Nancy Pelosi said, we're not going to fight against corruption.
Free markets.
Free markets, insider trading is free markets. No, that's the opposite of free markets. So as they gorge on their corruption, they can't be bothered to look up to see that the fascists aren't coming, they're already here.
All right, that does it for the first hour. We're gonna take a brief break, and when we come back, we've got breaking news in regard to Donald Trump's proposed press conference on the 1-year anniversary of the January 6th riots. Come right back.
While the Young Turks, the Friday show is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it. We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of that, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views. Voice Award winner, news and information channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
The haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against police. I told you we were coming.
Can you talk about it when it becomes a problem? Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America. Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy
democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. Tick-tock. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. Tick-tock. And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country. November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
That's how you do it when I smack you back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. We got a lot more news, let's do it.
All right. Donald Trump has decided to cancel the speech he was going to give on the 1-year anniversary of the January 6th riots. Now, he has released a statement about it saying, quote, in light of the total bias and dishonesty of the January 6th unselect committee of Democrats, 2 failed Republicans and the fake news media, I am canceling the January 6th press conference at Mar-a-Lago on Thursday, and instead we'll discuss many of those important topics at some rally at some other time. It will be a big crowd because of course he cares so much about how big his crowds will be. So I think this was a good move. We're not certain what has influenced this decision. The story just broke, but there is some speculation that there are Republican lawmakers who are concerned about him, holding a press conference, especially as a prayer service was going to be held for during that January 6th 1-year anniversary. And Republicans probably felt, not all of them, but some of them probably felt that it would hurt their chances in an election year, and maybe Trump should kind of stay out of the news on that day. But it's Trump, he's a wild card. Who knows how this story will develop or devolve moving forward?
Yeah, well, there's one thing for sure. Whatever Donald Trump does is because he thinks it's to his benefit. So he might have canceled it because he's worried about legal concerns, but Democrats are in charge. What legal concerns? Don't worry, they won't lay a glove on you, okay? Every once in a while I see people going on MSNBC and talking about, oh my God, prosecutors are gonna get Donald Trump. Please, spare us, just spare us, okay? You people are pathetic. Yeah. You're never gonna hold anyone in power accountable, even a fascist like Donald Trump. Okay, so The second, but I think the more likely reason he's canceling is not that many people are showing up to these events.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wanted to mention that, especially because he felt the need to include something about how big the crowd's gonna be.
Oh, totally. That's like when he was challenged on the size of his hands in one of the Republican presidential debates. And he immediately went to his.
There's no problem, believe me, there's no problem.
Yeah, about his genitalia.
People are saying.
Like, you don't have to say it about your hands, we can all see your hands, right? He's like, down there, believe me. What if a guy comes into a room and starts screaming about how you don't have to worry about his genitalia, it's plenty big enough? Trust me, it's not, okay? So in this case, when he's like, oh, I could get a big crowd. I could get a big crowd. I just don't want to. Oh, okay, so you couldn't sell it out. Not enough people were coming. We get it, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, his nationwide tour with Bill O'Reilly did not go as planned. There were many empty seats during that tour. And we talked about that as it was happening and some of the reasons for why it was happening. But look, ultimately, this is a small silver lining in a news cycle that's just riddled with terrible news. I'm happy that he's canceling it. He can't help himself. He's still, perpetuating these lies about how the election was stolen from him. It continues to divide the country in incredibly dangerous ways. You see a huge portion of American voters who genuinely believe that the election was stolen from him, even though judges that he himself had appointed had dismissed his claims of voter fraud. It's terrifying because it is ripping the country apart. And on that specific day, I personally was concerned that he was gonna incite even more violence, and we could do without that.
Yeah, well, so were Ivanka and Donald Jr. and almost every Republican that was in the building. They were all literally worried to death about how Trump was gonna incite more violence and get people killed, including his own vice president, because they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Yeah. And now, of course, they're like, oh no, dude, Patriots. Bunch of new polls out. One of them has Republicans saying, 56% of Republicans saying that what happened on January 6th was done because of patriots. So like breaking into the Capitol, causing violence and looking to execute the vice president is apparently what patriots would do. So all that Trump and the rest of the Republicans had to do was simply just say, yes, killing democracy is the patriotic, democratic thing to do. And they're like, yes, immediately, sir. We will now listen to you, it is patriotic. Hilarious wrinkle to that poll. 41% of Republicans said it was probably left-wing protesters.
No, but look, I think that it is it's indicative of what conservative media has done in response to the January 6th riots, right? Because we keep talking about how people like Tucker Carlson can't get their story straight. But what they do is they offer all these different options to Republican voters, and then they get to pick and choose which narrative they want to go with. So even among Trump's base, there is disagreement and there are contradictions in regard to what happened on January 6th and who was behind it. Some agree that it was Trump supporters and what they did was patriotic, while others argue that it was Antifa or that it was the FBI who egged them on or some sort of hoax. I mean, there are so many different narratives coming from Trump supporters, and that's not organic. It's not like they came up with it themselves. They're being essentially primed by people like Tucker Carlson, OAN, and other right-wing news organizations that are just giving them like a buffet of options to choose from.
So mainstream media does a great job of hoodwinking neoliberals and people that are in the educated classes, et cetera. And they're more sophisticated at brainwashing. But they don't do one thing that the right-wing media does. Right-wing media attacks logic itself. That's why to them, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I think they're patriots and Antifa, so what? But that makes no logical sense. I don't care. It's stunning. They're like, we don't care about logic. It doesn't have to be reasonable. So let me give you the exact numbers here. It's a CBS News YouGov poll, and I got I switched to two of the categories. So let me explain. 47% of Republicans said what happened at the Capitol on January 6th was patriotism. 47% of Republicans. The 56% number that I quoted for you guys was that's the number of Republicans who thought that the people on January 6th were just defending freedom. They were attacking the center of democracy to defend freedom. A majority of Republicans believe. because it doesn't have to make sense. They just have to hear from Tucker Carlson or Donald Trump, and they will instantly believe it. But yes, 41% of Republicans believe that it was left-leaning groups who did January 6th. So I would ask that 41%, who also probably a giant section of whom also called them patriots. Wait, were the left-leaning groups the patriots defending freedom on January 6th? No, it doesn't matter. Logic is for nerds. We just have feelings, lots and lots of feelings, and largely hate and fear. But apparently Trump can't even get them to muster that up at a rally, so he's now canceling January 6th. Or maybe he was worried too many Antifa was gonna show up.
Well, we do have a story about that specifically. It's important to actually hear from Trump supporters themselves, and we do have some great video to share with you on that very topic. But first, we're going to take a brief break. When we come back, we've got that story and more. And by the way, I don't typically promote the post game as much as I should, or the bonus episode as much as I should. Today, I'm gonna do it. The post game today for our members is gonna be fantastic. We're gonna talk about cats who are starting so many fires in places like South Korea that people have been warned about it. And I will compare cats to my dog, Charlie, with fun videos. So you should be a member. We're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, but look, keep
Not
it
a
real.
long time, but a good time.
Yes, but we're gonna dunk on Jimmy Dore so hard, and it's gonna be hilarious.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, not like, oh, God, no one thinks, it's not a debate anymore, trust me. It's clownorama, but it's gonna be absolutely hilarious. So tyt.com/join or hit the join button below on YouTube. We'll see you in a second. So first off, big announcement on Friday. So check that out. I think a lot of you are gonna love that announcement. When I say that, I usually deliver, okay? Usually, not every time. Okay, so podcasts, if you don't know, TYT shows are also in podcast form, wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Acast network. Our podcasts are totally taken off. It's a good, convenient way to listen, so check that out when you get a chance. There it is. You guys know how to get podcasts. All right, John Bickford just joined on YouTube. John, you're awesome. Thank you, brother. We appreciate it. Now let's go to Twitch for a second. Dave Schmidt gifted 2 subs. A Tropy gifted 5. PC Load Letter said, "Yay! I love this whole progressive movement. Where would I be without this much truth and facts told with the passion that it needs?" Thank you. We really appreciate it. Yes, if you're not pissed about the things that are going wrong, there's something wrong with you. Of course, the mainstream media goes, "Oh, to anyone who's cares about the world. Ugh, yuck. Ugh." No, real reporters don't care at all. They're like, "Whatever, dude. Fascist, not fascist. I can't tell the difference." We can tell the difference, and we don't mind sharing it with you. Dragon Daddy Bear 420 wrote in, "This is sick. When Republicans are in power, we don't get peanuts. When Democrats are in power, we still don't get peanuts. Manchin and Sinema are the best Republicans on their team. Think about it. They managed to fool their constituents into believing that they are Democrats." Very true, especially Sinema. Manchin doesn't try too hard to pretending to be a Democrat, but Sinema came in as a progressive. She said, "Oh my God, I'm gonna fight for you. I'm gonna fight for lower drug prices and universal health care." She's the one who killed lower drug prices and universal health care. Sinema is one of the worst, most disgusting politicians of my lifetime. R. Stone on Super Chat says, "Trump is so maniacal that if he gets back in the White House, he'll try to resend Biden's term, and Trump is entitled to 8 years without an election in between. You think it's crazy, but Democrats, please wake the hell up. No, nothing's crazy. No, guys, if Trump wins again, I don't think there'll be another election. I'm being serious about that. Blazin 42086 says, the Dems are worse, Republicans gonna Republican. The Dems are supposed to be our defenders. At least the Republicans are honest about who they are. But by the way, they're not though. Guys, their voters think that the Republicans are populist and fighting against corporations and fighting against the powerful. Like, to us, it's obvious what liars Republican politicians are. But the Republican voters are like, oh no, they're fighting for freedom. They're the prime bootlickers of corporate rule. Anyway, LJ Wombology says, I'll bet my super chat that Rogan can't wait to get banned so that he can be self-righteous about it. Oh my God, the self-righteousness would be just out of control. Rogan's now turned into a full-blown right-winger, so I'm sure he'd love victimhood. All right, we'll be right back. TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Janie Peterson. Janie just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. We love you for that. TYT.com/join for everybody else. Like we said, we're gonna have a hilarious bonus episode that's just for the members today. All right, Anna.
Also, thank you to Grandma Sunshine Dragon and to our moderators for picking her comment about us, because she says that I'm elegant and I really like that. Yeah. Thank you for watching, we really appreciate it. All right, let's get to our next story. CNN caught up with Trump supporters during Trump's nationwide tour with Bill O'Reilly to get their thoughts on the January 6th riots. We're quickly approaching the 1-year anniversary of those riots. And unfortunately, some of the answers given during these on the street interviews were as crazy as you would expect them to be. Let's start with the first video.
January 6th attack was not the Republicans nor Trump. It was the Democrats were behind it all. They're the ones that caused it all.
Do you really believe that?
I know it. And there is no way that a Republican would act that way. And there is no way that Trump had anything to do with what happened on January 6th.
But what about all the Trump supporters that have been charged and indicted?
Because it's all Democratic judges and people that were on the take from the Democrats.
So ignore all of the Trump flags among the Capitol rioters, ignore what they were chanting, what they were marching over to the Capitol to do immediately after Trump's rally. It was the Democrats, allegedly. And by the way, I just want to give you some information about those pro-Democrat judges that the woman was alluding to here. When it comes to all of those challenges to the election, more than 60 of those court battles, it turned out that it wasn't just Democrat-appointed judges who decided to dismiss these allegations. It was also judges that were appointed by Donald Trump himself. Here's one headline, for instance: the most remarkable rebukes from Trump's legal case from the judges he handpicked. At least 9 Trump-appointed judges or Supreme Court shortlisters have declined to bolster his claims of election fraud. None have ruled in his favor. Cenk.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment about that woman. Look, I feel bad for her because it turns out, as we've learned recently, it's super easy to brainwash people. If you just have to say, hey, I'm one of you. Tucker Carlson puts on a flannel shirt, and then he goes, all those people are FBI agents plus left-wingers plus patriotic Republicans. And you just pick. And she happened to pick, oh, they're all left-wingers. But like, understand what she's saying. She's saying they then go to court, those theoretically left-wing people. They say in open court they're not left-wingers, they're Republicans. They support Donald Trump. In fact, they're mad that Donald Trump isn't paying their bills and all those things. So she thinks, I guess, that all of them are what? CIA agents, but they're willing to go to jail even though they look like real people and they've been traced back in their communities and people have fought for them. And now 56% of Republicans say that they were defending freedom. Nope, logic not required. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We know who they are. They're definitely Trump supporters.
And she's not, look, sometimes when you see these man on the street interviews, oftentimes, like you'll see reporters cherry pick like the most outrageous statements, but this is not an isolated person, of isolated case. This is actually pretty indicative of what the Trump base believes, or at least a significant portion of the Trump base. In fact, here's a UMass Amherst poll indicating that nearly a third, 31% of Republicans blame the Democratic Party for the violence at the Capitol. Antifa, the informal anti-fascist political activist group, was blamed by over 1/5, 22% of Republicans, while 16% blamed the US Capitol Police, who have reported that over 70 officers were injured in the siege.
So Black Lives Matter they opposed because they said Blue Lives Matter. Now they say it was the goddamn cops. They assaulted themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'm shocked at how easy it is to brainwash people. Tucker Carlson, the night before, telling them cops are the greatest thing since sliced bread as long as they're killing and beating up black people. The next night he comes in and goes, yeah, the cops suck and they probably did the Patriot purge of January 6th. The FBI did, the authorities did, then they beat themselves up. And everybody goes, oh yeah, totally. We hate cops. What?
I mean,
what?
But like, are we really surprised? Isn't this, I mean, you see this happen with religion all the time, where they cherry pick certain things they like and reject and ignore parts of their religious doctrine that they don't like. So I'm not shocked with what's happening. And of course, this is all meant to propagandize people. And to your point about how you feel bad for the woman in that video, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that these are necessarily inherently bad people, but they have been indoctrinated by the media bubble, the filter bubble that they exist in. And I don't know whether there's gonna be anything done to kind of stop that or mitigate it. Certainly we haven't seen anything work in regard to trying to mitigate it. And everyone's super atomized and everyone is super like hardcore in their own political ideology and political bubble. It's ripping the country apart. By the way, that poll that I just shared with you, the UMass Amherst poll, is not the only one that had that kind of result. In fact, 41% of Republicans blame left-leaning groups for the violence on January 6th, according to another CBS poll. And it goes on and on, but I wanna, there we go. So here's another, the CBS poll that I'm referring to. Among all voters, 41% believe that the behavior that day was typical of most Trump supporters, but only 9% of Republicans believe that. But I wanna get to this next video because we do have some more for you. Let's take a look.
I think the whole reporting of it is a giant hoax. We are very peaceful people. So it was a total setup. To me, it was the FBI had set it up. I don't believe that they were Trump supporters that did that.
You said the whole thing's a setup. You don't really believe that, do you?
I do. I do. Because Trump won the election. They've proven it over and over again.
I really don't think Trump had much to do with it, and people that were supporters for him, some were involved, but I think they were enticed by the FBI.
So that's another one of the many theories that Trump supporters have. You know, it's Antifa, it was the Democrats, oh, it was the FBI, which, you know.
Yeah, I'm now at a point that I definitely feel sorry for these folks, and they're not gonna like that either. They're not gonna like that any better than me calling them idiots or crazy, but it's super obvious that they, of course they don't know what they're talking about. Do you think they went and saw the like, who the actual people are that are on trial and what they've said on social media, what they say to the judge? Do you think they read one of the 60 cases that Trump lost? That you saw them, they just said, oh, all the evidence shows that Trump won. Why? Because they're listening to right-wing media.
Exactly.
And right-wing media is just lying, just saying, oh yeah, Trump won. Oh, there's a lot of evidence. Show us one piece of evidence. You had 60 court cases. You didn't show one piece of evidence. It doesn't matter, I just say it and they believe me. And so, look, I've said this before, I give credit to the right-wing voters, okay? Yes, we're a left-wing show, but we're fair. They figured out step one. Mainstream media is lying to you, and they're brainwashing you in favor of corporate rule. But on step two, they went dangerously awry. They're like, oh, I don't like mainstream media brainwashing me, so I'll have right-wing media brainwash me, right? And get me to believe in totally cuckoo for Cocoa Puff stuff, right? And make me look even more ridiculous. By the way, if you're smug neoliberal and you think, yeah, see, status quo is awesome. I read the New York Times. Brother, I got bad news for you. You didn't even get to step one, okay? You still think, oh yeah, politicians are honest. I believe New York Times and CNN, that the millions of dollars of bribes they take doesn't affect them at all. Now, you didn't even get to step one, okay? For progressives, we easily got to step one. We see the brainwashing clear, and we're holding our sanity. But I'll tell you what are progressives doing in terms of action? Well, we're trying to push the Democratic Party to not the left, but just sanity, right? And to stop working for corporations and being against corruption. How's that working out for us? Not that well. So let me tell you, son, Democrats continue to do nothing, which is almost certain. And soon the left wing is gonna erupt. And so I don't want it to, but it's going to. And there's no way anyone can stop it.
What do you mean by that?
I think they're gonna go in the streets, and I think then there's gonna be more clashes with the right wing in the streets and the left wing in the streets, because the young that are on the left are not gonna sit around and listen to goddamn Jake Tapper. They're not gonna sit there and go, oh, Anderson Cooper, the Vanderbilt heir, says that the status quo is terrific, and we should just listen to corporations, and we shouldn't have health care, and I should pay couple of $1,000s on a surprise bill I got, and I should accept lower wages, and I should let corporations crush me into the ground. Well, if Anderson Cooper says it and the New York Times says it, no, the left wing at some point is gonna go, screw this. Where do we go and what do we do in the streets? And then, by the way, the right wing's gonna come out, and then we're gonna have a holy mess on our hands. And that's brought to you by Joe Biden and his corruption.
Well, I mean, the right wing is already out there.
Yes.
And we've already seen the consequences of those types of clashes. And the right wing has been, I think, pretty openly and transparently itching for a civil war. But
by the way, when that happens, I'll go further because it's almost inevitable at this point, because there's no way Biden and Pelosi and Schumer are gonna turn around. They're gonna do nothing, okay? They're not gonna help you. That's not who they are. So, and look at this, by the way, it started as anti-Trump, but we're honest. The other guys are fools who are lying to you to maintain corporate rule. And by the way, if the left wing and right wing go out there and clash, which I don't want to happen, but if it happens, Biden will side with the right wing. You think, no way, come on, Jake.
I can persuade them, Jack.
Yeah, you think that's a bridge too far. He wouldn't do that. Yes, he will. They'll crush left wing protesters first. Everyone in Washington will agree they're the real danger, okay? Including Biden, mark my words.
So I have one more video that I want to get to, because what's really fascinating about Trump's base is that there's division among them in regard to what they believe really transpired on January 6th. You have those who believe it's Democrats or Antifa or the FBI, and then you have those who acknowledge and accept the fact that it was Trump supporters, and they actually think what they did was awesome. So on the day of the riots, the CNN reporters actually spoke to some of the Trump supporters about what just had happened that day, and get a load of what some of them had to say about it.
At the time, some Trump supporters told me they were happy with what happened here at the Capitol. Are you proud of what happened here today?
Absolutely. I think we should have gone on in and yanked our senators out by the hair of the head and drug them out and said, no more.
I'm absolutely stand behind 100% what happened here today. 1,000%. I think it's terrible how this election was stolen.
Federal prosecutors have charged more than 700 people in connection with the Capitol riot and repeatedly documented the rioters' support for President Trump.
And that kind of thinking has not just gone away. Again, let's go back to that CBS News poll, which shows that a pretty significant portion of Republican voters, 47% of them, feel that what was done that day by Trump supporters was patriotic. It was patriotism.
Yeah. So guys, here's another problem. Those right-wingers, the 700 that were arrested, none of them have power. So yeah, they're gonna get relatively crushed, and they should. They were chanting about executions and they broke the doors down, etc. No question. But why isn't Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro charged?
Yep, exactly.
Last week they admitted it, and they had named it. It was called the Green Bay Sweep. Bannon's on tape that day explaining what the maneuver is, and they egged people on. And now they say, no, we weren't trying to cause violence. We're just trying to steal the election without violence. Well, no, you just admitted you were trying to steal the election. Why aren't they charged? Because they're powerful and they're elites. So if you're a right winger, understand these folks don't have your best interest in mind. They egg you on for their own benefit, then you suffer the consequences, and they sit comfortable in their mansions. Remember what Trump pardoned Steve Bannon on? Ripping off right wingers, not left wingers. Ripping off right wingers, oh, we're gonna do a wall. And then he laughed at you behind your back, took the money and robbed you.
Put it in his own pocket.
Put it in his own pocket. I think there was a scene, they were on a yacht and making fun of the guys who gave him the money.
Oh my God.
Okay, and Trump pardoned him. Oh, he's like, oh, that's a criminal, white collar criminal just like me.
But why wouldn't he? Exactly. I mean, it's the same thing that Trump has done. I mean, he had this huge fundraising effort meant to collect money from his base in order to fight all these legal battles in regard to election fraud. Pocketed the money. Didn't
100%.
spend any of it on the court battles.
And one last thing, it's really easy to tell who's a fake populist, whether they're pretending to be on the right or pretending to be on the left. They'll never criticize the other side. So now we have fake left wingers who are like, oh, the Democrats are terrible. Good, I agree. And they're like, how about the Republicans? No, they're okay. Wait, you're a left winger and you never criticize Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, and the Republicans that have led this insanity? You leave the right wing powerful alone and you're pretending to be a populist and a left winger? Now beware of grifters, they're everywhere. And like I said, easy guide. They only criticize one side. If you ask them to criticize the other side, well, that's where their bread is buttered, so they won't do it.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll give you an update on a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who just got convicted of fraud. But it isn't because she was going to defraud normal people. Mostly had to do with the fact that she upset investors. So we've got that story and more. You don't want to miss the details on that. Come right back.
All right, so first of all, if you want to see how, we say we want to fight for change, right? We've been doing it for 20 years. So have we had an impact? Good news, go to tyt.com/impacts and you can check it out for yourself and go, oh, they did that? Oh yeah, there it is, that they did it on air. Oh, that led to this, I see it now. So you can be part of that, So check it out, tyt.com/impacts. Lots of different stories there from all the different years. I also want to thank one of our sponsors, Aspiration. Look, they give away 10% of their profits. They're wonderfully progressive. You put your money there, you get the best interest rates. Plus, your deposits don't go to funding oil companies and private prisons. So have peace of mind. Aspiration.com/TYT, okay? Now, whenever you got our sponsors, always put the /TYT so we can get credit for it. Thank you guys. All right, now, speaking of getting credit, let me give you guys credit for all the wonderful people who just joined. Marlon Brimmer, Becca Gould, AKA Loki Dragon, that's already fun a couple of different ways. Ricardo Romanek. So Ricardo, Becca, Marlon, you guys are amazing, thank you. Janie, I thanked before. Faceplant Protocol, thank you for being so generous. on Super Chat. We really appreciate it. Alex Ceresi on Super Chat says, hey, TYT, what are you gonna do when Tucker turns America's straight fascist dictatorship in 2024? It's inevitable. It's not yet inevitable. I hope the Republican primary in 2024 is a mess. I hope they make the mistake of picking a corporate Republican instead of a fascist Republican. And we've been fighting corporate Republicans and Democrats for 40 years, and we're actually, I think we're on the edge of winning, but not in 24, but in 28. We just can't have a fascist end the country. But if they do, there is some percentage chance we'd have to do the show in exile. I'm an eternal optimist, and I never go in that direction. It's now on the board.
Where are we going?
I'd like to go to London, but we'll see. We'll talk it out.
It's too rainy.
Okay, well, look, for God's sake, let's all work together so it doesn't come to that, okay? So now, Alicia Perkins says, honestly, if I were a seditious Republican, I would be mad about being accused of being Antifa. I'm sure they would stand up for themselves if they weren't all locked up. So yeah, but it doesn't matter. You interview them, you show them on tape, they still don't believe it. The other Republicans won't believe it. Sigma Comics says, Anna, don't hate too hard on the cats. Our calico hero fights against animal abuse in our comics.
I don't hate cats. I like cats a lot, but I also really love dogs and obviously made a decision to choose one, not the other.
Okay, cats causing fires are in the bonus episode for members. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Tons of news, let's do it.
All right. Elizabeth Holmes, founder and CEO of the failed blood testing startup known as Theranos, has been found guilty on 4 counts of fraud. And this was the conclusion of the 4-month-long trial on the issue. So for those of you who maybe have not been following this story, let me give you some context and then I'll give you some detail in regard to the charges that she has been now convicted of. According to the indictment, the charges stem from allegations that Holmes and Ramesh Sunny Balwani engaged in a multi-million-dollar scheme to defraud investors, and investors is really a key word here, and a separate scheme to defraud doctors and patients. Now, both schemes involved efforts to promote Theranos, a private healthcare and life sciences company with the stated mission to revolutionize medical laboratory testing through allegedly innovative methods for drawing blood, testing blood, and interpreting the results of patient data. Now, Ms. Holmes had falsely claimed that Theranos's blood tests could detect, I should say, a variety of ailments with just a few drops of blood. I mean, everything she was claiming was riddled with fraud. There was a whistleblower who blew the whistle on the reality of this revolutionary technology and how the technology wasn't really there. And prosecutors were able to convince jurors that Holmes lied to investors about Theranos's technology in the pursuit of money and fame. Now, she had become incredibly popular and incredibly wealthy while promoting Theranos and the technology that didn't really exist. In fact, she had an estimated personal wealth of $4.5 billion in 2014. Now, Holmes did capture the attention of heads of state. Wow, what a shocker, with a private revolutionary healthcare model. Top business leaders and wealthy families with idealistic plans to revolutionize the healthcare industry. She traveled the world on private jets and was given awards and glowing magazine cover stories and lauded as the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. In fact, let's take a quick look at this Forbes cover that celebrated her, and again, the technology that she claimed she had but didn't really have. And so what are the guilty verdicts? 3 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud against investors, and also 1 count of conspiracy to defraud investors. Notice how there was nothing there in terms of a conviction in regard to defrauding patients and doctors.
So guys, think about which one is more important. So they had a good write-up on this, and they explained a bunch of the things that they got wrong. So for example, one patient had HIV, and the test didn't tell him that. That's pretty dangerous. Another patient had a dangerous pregnancy that could end her life, and the test said she wasn't pregnant because the tests were a sham. They didn't work at all, right? Another one said that, oh my God, you've got a dangerous pregnancy that can cause a miscarriage or is going to miscarry anyway, right? Well, in those situations, a lot of times they then induce the miscarriage to not go through that pain, right? Turns out she didn't have anything wrong with the pregnancy. Oh. So, I mean, what she did to the average person was unbearable. No prosecution, because they're not powerful, so who cares? The reason she got prosecuted and convicted is because she dared to rip off other rich people. Her company was valued at $9 billion. She humiliated other rich people because they looked like idiots. They all rushed in. Now here's a great part. This is I don't know if this was intended as a reference, but in the movie Don't Look Up on Netflix, there's one of these Silicon Valley types, and he won't do peer-reviewed studies. And the scientists are like, other scientists have to look at it, otherwise we don't know if it's going to work. Her stuff wasn't peer-reviewed, and they gave her $9 billion anyway. They're like, who cares, we're going to get rich. And if you're wondering why, aren't these guys supposed to be the smartest people in the world with all of this money? Well, number one, the media lied to you. Just because they have money doesn't mean they're smart. That's just mythology. That's called the myth of meritocracy. Well, if they have the billions, they must be the smartest people. Do they look smart to you? They flushed it down the toilet on an obvious scam, right? That's why they're going after her like, you better punish her.
Yeah.
She exposed us for the idiots that we are,
I mean,
right?
What happened to Ozzy? Why did Ozzy fall apart?
Same thing, but on a smaller level, and it was about digital media. And they got what? They got over $100 million.
Yep.
I think, look, the different people have it at different estimates. Some have it as high as $150 million. All of it gone now, because they never had the numbers. They never had it in the first place. And so you're wondering, okay, fine, maybe these incredibly wealthy people aren't as bright as the media told me they are, right? But really, they keep throwing away money like this? Why do they do it? I have a simple answer for you. And this is definitely it. And you're gonna be thinking, nah, it can't be it. No, I swear to God, this is all it is, greed.
Yeah, why would anyone not believe that?
No, they would believe it as like a contributing factor, but they're not gonna check. Look, guys, I mean, there's still digital media companies out there that are worth billions of dollars, that have received billions of dollars in investment. No, I'm not exaggerating. Billions of dollars in investment. Nobody ever did any due diligence. They don't even bother checking because they're like, oh, somebody else is going to invest. I'm going to invest. I want the money. Oh, that's a miracle. I want the money. I'm going to do it. It's me. So you put in the FOMO, you put in the greed, and they get the $9 billion easily with no peer-reviewed science.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And by the way, just to give you some more detail into how much the investors lost as a result of the fraud. In total, Holmes was found guilty of defrauding investors of nearly $145 million. The underlying wire fraud amounts for those charges ranged from $38 million for PFM Healthcare Master Fund, from PFM Master Fund, a San Francisco-based healthcare hedge fund, to almost $100 million for Lakeshore Capital Management, a fund connected to the DeVos family office.
Oh, love it! Can't get enough of it.
Silver linings. Silver linings.
As the Jamaicans say, all good.
Yes.
All good. Couldn't be happier.
And of course, she made the curious decision to testify during this trial. I believe she testified over 7 days, and at some points had accepted some responsibility for what she had done, but then went on to blame her 20-year-old business partner for taking control of everything and really being at fault for everything that had gone down. But at the end of the day, she has been convicted at least of those 3 charges pertaining to investors. And now she faces a maximum of 20 years in prison per charge, likely to be served concurrently. A sentencing date could not be set at a hearing next week, or could be set at a hearing next week. As a first-time offender, Holmes is actually unlikely to face the full term. She could also be fined and required to pay restitution to her former investors.
If she ripped off you guys, I mean, she already endangered your health and she won't suffer any consequences for that, likely. There's no talk of following up with more cases. Why not? She endangered people's health. That's also against the law. By the way, there's an answer to why not. You wanna know what it is? Because if they say her company endangered your health, well, that could set a precedent for other companies endangering your health. And our government doesn't work for us. It works for the rich and the powerful and corporate interests. So corporate interests say, no. We're not prosecuting her for endangering people's health because that might put me in trouble. Okay, we're only prosecuting her for wasting the money of the rich. Hey, it was a risky investment. You put the money in, you were the sucker. You didn't ask for scientifically reviewed articles. You didn't ask for any evidence. The funny thing is, I'm not sure I would have convicted her on this. Well, you should have done your due diligence.
Oh, fascinating.
Right, I mean, I would have convicted her on endangering people's health, but hey, you're an idiot who wants to put in $150 million without checking. That's kind of on you, brother.
I know, but I think that sets a dangerous precedent. I mean, I immediately thought back to the Wall Street fraud that took place in the lead up to the housing crash, right? I mean, think about how they lied about the soundness of those mortgages.
And were they ever prosecuted?
No, they weren't.
No,
and they absolutely should have been. But my point is, if you don't prosecute her for the fraud that she engaged in, because look, the securities fraud that Wall Street engaged in, I'm actually shocked that they didn't have to suffer the consequences for that.
No, I'm not shocked by anything anymore. So look, we talk about precedent here, but really, nobody cares anymore. The prosecutors don't care, the government doesn't care. They'll violate precedent, they'll be hypocritical. So they get on a wire fraud. Well, how about the guys, to Anna's point, that ripped us off of billions of dollars in 2008 in the home crash? Nope. You know, the only people prosecuted were people that ripped off other rich people during 2008. A Goldman Sachs partner,
right? But
not for the fraud, but because he defrauded other Goldman Sachs board members. Defrauding you guys, rock and roll. That's no prosecutor is gonna go after you, go after a rich person for that. You defraud other rich people, then you're in a lot of trouble. Our government is so corrupt. Today there was a story about how Lula is probably gonna win in Brazil. We had a great progressive win in Chile.
Yeah.
Other governments are far more democratic and far cleaner than our government is. America now one of the most corrupt countries in the world.
Yeah, I mean, America is definitely corrupt. I'll get into the details of that Brazilian election story on the show tomorrow, so don't miss that. But for now, why don't we move on to hospitals being overwhelmed with COVID patients and how Ben Shapiro thinks that vaccine mandates are to blame. So, as the Omicron coronavirus variant blazes throughout the United States and as more and more hospitals become overwhelmed with unvaccinated COVID patients as a result, Ben Shapiro has decided to share his theory on what's actually leading to those hospitals being overwhelmed. He doesn't think that it's because people are unvaccinated. He thinks it's because there are vaccine mandates. Well, maybe he has a point, who knows? Let's hear what he has to say.
You know, it seems like the president won his election because of, he was said to be the one that could fight the virus. That has been a lie. I don't think anybody really had the tools to fight the virus. It is a virus. You can only mitigate things by giving states the tools. So I guess my question is, if he won because of that, will he lose because of that as well?
I mean, I think the answer is yes. The president overpromised and underdelivered. He made a promise that was a complete lie, and that was that he was going to be able to shut down the virus. As you say, no one has the capacity to shut down this virus. As we've seen in states that have extraordinarily high percentages of their citizens vaccinated, you're still seeing huge spikes. Now, what's amazing about all of this that we're seeing right now is that people are panicking over Omicron. Omicron is not causing mass death. It is not causing mass hospitalization. In fact, the problems that we are having in terms of hospital shortages are largely due to the vax mandates, and a lot of healthcare workers workers who are not going back to work because they're not allowed to work. The reality is that in half the country right now, people are living normal lives. They're going about their daily business. And in another half of the country, and in the halls of the White House, precisely the opposite is true. There's a mandate for everyone to panic, no matter whether the data supports the panic or not.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. I just want to make a few quick points, starting with the argument that Biden overpromised and underdelivered. Listen, I remember Biden telling the American people in a press conference, in an address to the American people that, hey, we're gonna roll out the vaccine, please get vaccinated, and by the 4th of July, this is supposed to be 4th of July of 2021, you'll be able to go to the barbecues and enjoy yourselves. The thing that I think people have a hard time understanding about a novel virus is that the situation is unfortunately fluid and things change. And so yes, it does appear that he overpromised, but I don't think that, look, at the time everyone believed that if we get most people vaccinated, we'll be in the clear. But here's the truth. If most people are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, they are in the clear in that it is very unlikely that they will be hospitalized or that they will die from coronavirus. Are breakthrough infections possible? Yes. But even as the number of COVID cases rise as a result of new variants, if most people are vaccinated, the number of hospitalizations shouldn't rise. And if you look at hospitals right now, the ones that are overwhelmed with unvaccinated coronavirus patients. We want to avoid that. That is the heart of the issue here. And they seem to, I don't know why, have some sort of vested interest in withholding that information from their audience. And I don't know, like, why?
Yeah, well, let me try to break it down in a couple of ways. So first off, on Biden, you've seen us criticize him 1,000 times. And I probably call him a liar more than any left-winger, right-winger, or anyone in the middle. And so I can list all the things that he said he was gonna do, and he didn't do at all, and he never intended to do. But I don't think this one's on Biden at all. So, and you could see in that question what the right-wing agenda was. And we should have seen it earlier, which is he said, well, if he can't control the virus, I guess he should lose the election, right? Meanwhile, they've been telling their audience, don't get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated.
Good point.
And now they're saying, oh, look at that. Coronavirus is out of control. If Trump lost because of it, I guess Biden should lose because of it. How callous they are is grotesque. So now, Biden handled the coronavirus perfectly. No, we've talked about different things he should have done, including having more tests out there, et cetera. But overall, that's the one area where he's done pretty well. They did pass a COVID relief bill. They have actually pushed for science. And the right wing says, because again, they know their audience doesn't care about logic. They say, now remember, being unvaccinated is awesome. Can you believe Biden's got all these hospitals filled? But wait a minute, the hospitals are filled with the unvaccinated.
No, it all makes sense now. Because remember, earlier this week we shared a story regarding red states who are furious over the fact that the Biden administration is trying to distribute the monoclonal antibody treatments, which are limited and in short supply, evenly across all states that need it, right? There were 7 states that were hoarding the vast majority of the monoclonal antibody treatments that were available. And all of those states happen to be red states that have discouraged people from getting vaccinated. The only state in that list that has above 50% full vaccination rate is Florida. But the point is, the reason why I bring that up is because they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to give the perception that coronavirus is out of control and Biden should lose his re-election campaign as a result of that. But in an effort to prevent deaths, it's like Regeneron, monoclonal antibodies. Like we need to get our hands on that to mitigate the damage that we're doing to our own freaking constituents with this disinformation.
Totally. And so one last thing about Shapiro, sleight of hand. That's what we break down here. He says, some of the states with the biggest vaccination rates still have hospital surges, but he didn't tell you who's in the hospital.
Right.
Even though they have big vaccination rates, they still have a significant minority that are unvaccinated because of people like Ben Shapiro and Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, et cetera. Now, it's the unvaccinated that are over 90% of the people in the hospitals. Now, that's not us saying it. It's every doctor, it's every hospital saying it, including in red states, rural areas. Go check talk to your actual doctors and hospitals in your area. They'll tell you the same thing. So you see that? They get you guys, if you're a right winger, they endanger your health and your life, and then they go, oh, you see that? You should blame Biden for it. Worst people on earth.
All right, look, the post game. I keep calling it the post game because I like the post game, Cenk. Okay,
all right.
All right, it's gonna be lit. We're gonna dunk on door, but more importantly, fun puppy videos.
But seriously?
Literally, I'm not kidding.
Yeah, I hear you on that. That's a funny story, but the Jimmy Dore thing is hilarious. You guys are gonna absolutely love it. TYT.com/join, or if you're on YouTube, just hit the join button below. Members, we'll see you there right now.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was Too Strong Coffee? Yes, new, TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT.
300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed